Welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I'd like to share with you one of my most prized possessions, tool-wise, of course. This tool is very special to me. It's very near and dear to my heart. This is the type of tool that I really hope will be passed on to my children and my children's children and will just remain in the family for eternity. My question for you, do you have a very special heirloom tool that you hope to see passed down to your children or somebody close in your family? Let me know in the comments section down below. Now, what's in the box? Well, we have a few things in the box, but the main thing in the box that I have to share is this tool right here. This is a precision crosscut saw multi-tool. This was made by Simmons Saw and Steel Company, and Simmons Saw and Steel Company was established in 1832. Although I can't pinpoint the exact date range as to when this tool may have been manufactured, due to the company being established in 1832, I would put a guesstimate that this tool is about 150 years old. So we have the multi-tool, we have a spider gauge, and then we have the original manual that came with this tool. So first, let's take a look at this document that came with this tool. This is the original document, and to me, it's incredible that this document has survived all these years. So this document not only provides a set of instructions for the use of this precision crosscut saw tool, but it also provides a part list, as well as it's a bit of an advertisement for other tools that you could purchase to help you with filing and setting the teeth on your crosscut saw. So first, the parts list. What's incredible about this tool was back in the day, you could order any replacement part that you needed, and each replacement part is clearly identified with these numbers. So if I flip the page over very carefully, all parts of this tool are interchangeable. In case of breakage or loss, parts may be obtained from our agents, branch houses, or factories. When ordering separate parts, please give the name and the number of the part required, the number of the parts wanted, and enclose the necessary price as per the list below. So let's look at some of these original prices. So the frame, $1.15. If you needed a new gauge screw, I guess 2 came in a pack, 12 cents. A new gauge screw guide plate, 2 came in a pack, 12 cents. We've gotten away from this, and that's a shame. I'd like to explain why I have such an appreciation for this tool. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, if you wanted to harvest lumber, it would take 2 men on a crosscut saw sawing on a tree all day just to get it bucked up into a few different logs that you would then hopefully be able to haul to a mill and, ultimately produce some lumber. If your crosscut saw was not filed properly, it would just be a hellish day. So having a crosscut saw filing tool, a multi-tool like this, was of critical importance, and the guys that were on those saws knew it. So once the Industrial Revolution came through and there was the advent of the chainsaw, right? There were hit and miss powered saws. I have a video, one of those on my channel. But then you have the regular chainsaw. Once those types of saws came into play, this type of tool became obsolete, and it's been lost in time, lost in history, and there's very few of us that really have an appreciation for tools like this. When you want to file a crosscut saw, the first thing that you need to do is something called jointing the saw. And that means taking a flat file and filing all the cutter teeth and rakers to a uniform height. You want the file to touch all of those teeth. So to use this tool for jointing the saw, you would take a flat file, position it into the tool like so, and then there is a screw that you would tighten to clamp down on the flat file. And you can see how the file is offset from this plane of the tool. So you would then position this over the top of the saw, and you would run this along the length of all those cutter teeth and rakers. So after you finish jointing the saw with the flat file, meaning that you'd have a flat spot on the top of all the cutter teeth, these are the cutter teeth, and flat spots on the tops of all the raker teeth, what you would do then is file the cutter teeth. So you could see you sharpen these in opposite direction and they look like shark's teeth. But here's the next important thing after you finish sharpening the cutter teeth. What you would have to do is you would have to file the rakers down slightly because you want your cutter teeth sticking up a little bit higher than the raker teeth. The raker teeth should be a little bit lower than the cutter teeth. So how do you control how much material to remove off the rakers? Well, that's where this adjustable hardened steel plate comes into play. So taking a look at this tool, when we want to file our raker teeth, we can adjust how far we file down these rakers by simply loosening up this set screw, and sliding this hardened steel filing plate to the left. Now the question is, what is the meaning behind these numbers 0, 8, and 16? So I'm going to read directly from our instruction manual here. When the filing rack is set so that the notch on the side is in line with 0 on the scale, which this would be in line with 0, the rakers will be filed in line with the cutter teeth. So that means after we finish filing our cutter teeth, if we were to file the rakers with a setting of 0, the rakers would be set at the same height as the cutter teeth. If it is desired to have the rakers 1/64th inch lower than the points of the cutter teeth, place the notch on the filing rack halfway between 0 and 8 on the scale. So here we have 0, here we have 8, so we would position this notch, this edge of the tool, in between 0 and 8, and if we were to file the rakers, this would have the rakers sit 1/64th of an inch lower than the tips of the cutter teeth. Now, if we wanted to go to the max, if we wanted to have the rakers 1/16th of an inch lower than the cutter teeth, we would position this edge of the tool in line with number 16. So the question is, how much lower would you want your rakers than the tips of your cutter teeth? I would say that probably depends on the species of wood that you're cutting through, whether it's hardwood or softwood, and then, each individual species probably has its own characteristics. But I would think if you're cutting through hardwoods, you would want these raker teeth set a little bit lower. That way you're removing less material, thus it's not as hard to pull the saw through the kerf. However, if you're cutting through something soft, something easy to cut through, like a real soft pine, I would think you'd want to have these raker teeth higher, because when those cutter teeth cut through the kerf, you should be able to remove more material, of course, because you're sawing through a softer wood. Perhaps the most stressful part about this entire job is something called swaging the teeth. Now, in order to swage the teeth, what we basically do, we basically tap on the tooth and we try and bend this tip over, and we hammer this down slightly to bring this tip to the final set point. Now, this is important because as these cutter teeth go through the kerf, they cut in like a little channel. And having this tooth swaged basically makes it easier for that wood material to kind of curl out of the kerf, and it sits down in this channel until the saw is brought all the way through the log, and then those chips are expelled. Swaging the teeth is a very stressful job. Because you risk breaking these teeth, especially on these older saws. This metal is very temperamental. So how far down do you swage the teeth? Well, again, you want to curl, but how far you want to bring that down depends, I would also think, on the type of wood you're cutting through, similar to what we just talked about. But how would you check how far to swage that tooth? Well, you would use your Simmons crosscut saw tool. So if we look at the top of the tool, we have this set gauge bolt, and there's a dial with different numbers on it. There's a little notch on the screw right here, and there's a kind of like a holding knob right here. So you would set this to the depth you'd want to swage your teeth. You'd probably give this a few light taps. This is a very slow and painstaking process. Then you take your tool and go over your raker teeth, and if you listen, if that's where I wanted to set my raker teeth, it's still making contact, so I would have to swage these teeth down a bit further. So cast into the tool are 8 divisions. One complete rotation of this set screw would be equivalent to 1/32nd of an inch. If we take a look at the set screw itself, there is a line which notates its orientation on the dial. Each division, which again there are 8, so each division is equivalent to 4/1000ths of an inch. The next thing you'd have to do is take a file, and you'd have to try and come from the side and just get these to a point, but being very careful not to remove any material off the top, because you want the top, to be at a uniform height. So Typically I'd use a triangular file, and it takes a very steady hand. This is a very tedious job, but this is what I would do next. So after we've gone through the painstakingly slow process of adjusting and setting the rakers, we need to focus on the cutter teeth. We need to check what's called the set on the cutter teeth. And the set is basically how far bent or offset the cutter teeth are away from the saw. And it's really important that we have the proper offset or set on the cutter teeth to ensure that there's not excessive drag when we're pulling the saw through the cut or curve, but also to ensure that, you know, these aren't overset, that we're cutting way too wide. So these cutter teeth need to be offset or set to just the right amount. And we check that with something called a spider gauge. This is a Simmons spider gauge. I don't think this was original to the tool. I think this was purchased as an accessory and kept with the tool. But how this works, if I put this on a flat portion of the saw and I rock this in all directions, notice back and forth, there's a little bit of movement, maybe 1/5 of an inch. So what we would do, we'd take this spider gauge and bring it up to the very tip of the cutter tooth that we want to check the set on, and then I would rock this in all directions. And notice that there's a little bit of rock up and down, which means I do in fact need to adjust the set on this cutter tooth. I actually need to bend this out slightly. So if we have up and down rock, that means that the tooth is not set far enough out. If we have side to side rock, I'm going to try and show you what side to side rock looks like. So if we have side to side rock, that actually means that the cutter tooth is overset, meaning that it's bent too far out and it actually needs to bend back in. Now, how do you bend these cutter teeth? Well, there's actually a special tool for that. I don't have one, so what I've used in the past is just an adjustable wrench. At the conclusion of today's video, I will post still shots of every individual page in this instruction manual in case you do have this tool and you don't have the manual. That way you can still access the information you need. This is a way to kind of preserve this information for future generations to come. Now, my recommendation for you, keep your eye out for these tools because these tools are very precious. These are heirloom tools, and once they're gone, they're gone. So definitely keep an eye out for them. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to open up this sarcophagus of crosscut saws. I packaged up these saws in that wood holder back in like 2018 when I was making the transition, when I had to move from my old house to this house, and they haven't really seen the light of day since. I think there's like 11 saws in there, and there's a combination of bucking and felling saw. Well, I only have one bucking saw. This is a bucking saw because it's thicker. The felling saws are thinner. The bucking saws are more sought after because they're a bit rarer, so keep your eye out for bucking saws. I am considering doing another restoration video on one of these saws, but the only trouble is it's a very long and tedious process. You know, it's like 10 to 12 hours to properly restore one of these saws, to clean it, to join it, to file it, to bring it back to life. It's a long, slow, tedious process, and it's very scary swaging those teeth because if you chip one of those teeth while you're swaging it, you know, those raker teeth, you have to consider starting over. So it's a bit of a risky job. It's actually very rewarding, and it would be good to have a sharp one of these on hand in case an EMP were to occur, because that would totally change modern life as we know it. Real quick, where did I get all these saws from and how much did I pay for them? Well, I got all these saws from Craigslist back in the day. You know, before Facebook Marketplace was a thing, we used to use Craigslist, and I got these from an old woman. She said her son used to use them in the Boy Scouts. Kind of hard to say how old all these saws are, but I would think most of these are at least 100 years old. How much did I pay for each saw? I want to say I paid about $7 a saw, which was a phenomenal deal. That's back before crosscut saws and things of this nature became popular, and now they're much more sought after. So keep your eye out for saws, filing tools. They're really good to have on hand, and again, they're just very precious heirloom tools. So anyway, I'd like to conclude today's video. Thank you for watching. As always, I will catch you on the next one.